I think the reason why most people struggle to find their purpose is because as a society, we've prohibited our sense of individual sovereignty. And so we've really started to, in our schooling systems, in the way that we believe of what success is. Like you go to school, you go to university, you have a family, like there is a set path that is kind of laid out of what is considered to be a successful way of life. And so in tandem with that, it's like we've forgotten to listen to understand like how to listen to our bodies. We're not being encouraged to challenge and say like, well, what do I actually think about that? Is that something I want to do? And so in doing so, it's like, it's a lot easier for us just to fall in line and follow than it is to really start to sense like, okay, what is my intuition telling me here? And being empowered by the system to actually then follow that. And so I think a lot of the time it's a lot easier, or we get entrapped into these situations of what we think is good, rather than actually taking the time to listen and to explore. And I also think in conjunction with living in a society that establishes money as our primary success factor also shifts that, because our relationship of like, well, I need all these things, so I need to earn a certain amount, and therefore what's going to be a good job to get me a certain amount of livelihood, rather than really kind of tuning in and being like, okay, well, where do I want to be lit up? What can I do? And so the more space, I think, earlier on when we're raising children and teenagers is like encouraging them to have that freedom to start listening and following like what's exciting, and to have space to experiment, like to get things wrong and to try it out. Like I think that enables you to start finding your own path and having the courage to realize that it's okay to take risks. It's okay to do something that everyone else isn't, even if it seems scary at times.
Hi, my name is Senka Caro. I'm founder of LightNet, and my passion and purpose is to make the impossible possible. In this new year of 2026, I sat down with Sofia Sarkar. She is from the Collective Paradigm Consultancy, and she helps brands and big companies that are centered around regeneration solidify their essence and go big. She is incredibly smart, and she's been in a huge journey of surrender. Quite interestingly, though she was raised in London, she is most recently living in Lisbon on the beach, where we are going to be for the wave this year. You can go to holomovement.net/wave to join us in Lisbon for spoon bending and more.
I would say I discovered that my purpose is about tuning into essence and really understanding how that wants to be activated, and recognizing what the unique role of when we understand what our essence is and the energy that carries. It's like, what is the role that can then play in a community? Now, whether that's as an individual or as an organization, it's kind of seeing like how that energy wants to come alive, and really listening to it and seeing how that can create itself through whether that's experiences or products or projects or your relationships. But it's really kind of staying true to that core essence and seeing like what wants to flow, where does it want to flow towards, and retaining that kind of arc as you go through your journey as a creator. I think as we step into a more regenerative context, it's really understanding that we all have a role to play as creators to create value in this world, whether that's through a conversation or through what we put out there and the things that how we choose to spend our time and our ways of being. So it's, you could say it's the vibe, like what is, what is the energy that you're kind of naturally bringing? And I think at an individual, it's that kind of, it's the feeling. It's not necessarily putting a personality to something, but it's like the way that something vibrates, you know? So when I, for example, was working with a friend and I was asking her, like, okay, I want you to go to this moment where you're really happy, like where, like what's there? And we kind of went through this journey, and she was, you know, in the sense of like stillness and, you know, lying on a beach with a friend. And it's like the qualities of that sense of being. It's like those are the qualities of that feeling that you want to encapsulate. And so when I speak to clients at a group level, it's like, as you come together as a collective, like what is that energy? You know, if you're creating something, is it like fiery and activisty, or is it about healing and nurturing? Like how, like when I think about it, like I see it as like colors and shapes. Like how is this thing moving? You know, so whatever you create, that energy is like flowing through as the kind of core DNA that creates this kind of sense of coherence and frequency. I named my company The Collective Paradigm because I truly believe that we are in the beginning of a paradigm shift. And when I was really starting to think about, you know, who is this next version of myself that I wanted to be, and realizing what are the things that really matter to me, that I feel like this is the thing I've got to roll in, like that was one of them. And so through my kind of previous work as an innovation consultant, I would look a lot at future forecasting. And what I started to observe was that as AI is starting to evolve and emerging technology, it's helping us look at complexity. It's helping us start to kind of navigate and make connections in a way that we currently can't, alongside quantum computing and quantum science, which is also starting to create a much deeper kind of systemic understanding of things, which then marries when you look at this kind of spiritual awakening that is happening across the globe of understanding things as oneness, as these nested layers, which again is then backed up by the leaps that we're starting to see in quantum physics. So even if kind of mental or, you know, heart space people aren't there, mentally they're kind of going like, oh, okay, well that's being backed up there. So we're starting to expand. And as we move from a sustainable context and recognizing that we have to start looking at systemic change, regeneration beyond just land and regeneration as a way of being is really starting to come into that context. And essentially regeneration is really looking at how we can come back to ourselves as nature, as an interconnected space. So when these three things start to come together, all of them essentially start to look at how things have an interconnected point of view. And I think that is the shift that we're moving from a mechanical solid lens coming out of like the Industrial Revolution into an interconnected perspective. And so when that happens, we move into, you know, we have to be thinking about the collective. And for me personally, I think it's about, we have to deepen and individuate as much as we can to find what our essence is, to find what our unique, true contribution and value is, so that we can come into service. And so, as we've recently been learning from the ayahuascas, like spending time with them, is talking about like, what is the song that's being played by all of us and our unique role in it. So when you really start to tap in and be like, this is the thing that I carry that's mine, and you and express it in all of its liveliness and richness, we've all got something unique to contribute, and also means that we don't need to compete as much anymore, because, you know, it's like, I don't want to do that. You go do that, because you know what, you're better at it than me, and like you enjoy it. And finding where that kind of unique space is what will enable us to kind of go forward within this shift. So it's both the kind of mindset of moving to this interconnected worldview, but also just like kind of recognizing that it's about coming into together as community into ecosystems. It probably all started about 8 years ago. I used to work in advertising, and you know, I was doing behavior change work. So there was lots of campaigns that were going well. And this guy turned around and said to me like, oh, okay, so, you know, what are your hobbies? Like, what do you like doing? And I was like, I love art and I love dancing. And then I kind of was like, I don't actually remember the last time I did any of those things. Like, work had become so much like my life, and I was passionate and I loved it, but it was like I'd kind of was losing my sense of self within it. And so it sent me on this journey of like trying to I went cliche, go traveling, and try and find out, what it was I was doing, and essentially doing something impactful, doing something that involved ideas, was that kind of red thread. And so up until that was kind of an evolving journey of just trying different stuff. But then in 2021, I was stuck in London, pretty unhappy, just being like, okay, like I'm kind of here, I'm doing this interesting like purpose consulting stuff, like interesting projects, but something's also not quite feeling right. And my whole life over the space of like 5 weeks just blew up. So like my dad went into hospital with a heart attack, one of my best friends died, I broke up with my partner, like my sister had a baby and there was like complications with us having to help look after him. Like my grandparents sold their house because my grandfather had recently just passed away, which I was meant to be living in. Like it was literally like one thing. I lost my job, like every week. It was just like things that normally happen like once in a lifetime. And I got to the end of the 6 weeks and was just like, I don't know if I can take anymore. Like I was holding on by a thread, like my mental health. And I had been building a van during this time because I'd come back and got stuck in lockdown and was just, not wanting to do the whole mortgage thing. So anyway, the van was ready and I was just like, I can't be here anymore. Like there is nothing here for me in England anymore. Like I love my family, but I have to find my path. And so I took the van, and I'd always been drawn to Lisbon. Like I was always like, that's a city I could live in. And it just so happened that I had, over the last 10 years, passed through this little fisherman's town called Ericeira. And I didn't really know, I just kind of went there for the day because it was like en route to somewhere else. And it just so happens that every time I'd gone, I'd seen this astrologer who gave me these really interesting readings. And as a result of seeing her, I ended up making some pretty significant choices. One of which was when I quit my job in advertising overnight basically. I was on the trajectory for like 30 under 30s and, CEO kind of pathway. And I just was like, no, I can't do this anymore. And I walked in the next day and just gave my notice and was like, I'm out. And they're like, are you sure? And I was like, yeah, I can't. And that was what sent the first leap of going on traveling. So anyway, I was like, that town was pretty nice, that place that I just stopped in. It seems it's by the beach, it's outside the city, I could probably chill there. So anyway, I drove to Portugal, and the minute I got there, my whole body was just like, okay, this is where I'm meant to be. And I was just so calm. And I guess what unfolded after that was like me really feeling like for the first time ever, I really belonged somewhere. And I was meeting all of these people that are like really reevaluating how we live and our way of life. And so as I arrived in Portugal and I started to kind of settle down, I was then starting this new innovation consultancy, and I was also then starting to be opened up to new ideas, I guess. Like I was finding my way into regeneration, having been in a sustainable context and realizing like this isn't really right. But then starting also to go through like, going to static dances and being in like eco communities and co-living and just really kind of seeing like different ways that people wanted to live. Which alongside all of this, I then went to a festival and met this guy, as you do, and had this like wild like telepathic connection with him, and was just like, after we left, I was just like, I need to understand this about myself. Like I've literally been spending my whole life just saying like these weird coincidences, like I'd have dreams and they'd come true, or like I'd guess someone's like how many brothers and sisters and what their family dynamics were when they were kids, so I'd just guess it. And anyway, it sent me on this whole pathway of understanding energy and seeing energy workers and healers and shamanic retreats and firewalking, and it was just like one thing after the other, and I was like, oh my god, the cosmic kind of creations, like bloody wild and like so much fun. And as I was doing all of that inner work and starting to understand stuff, it was just like really shifting my perspective, whilst at the same time of doing this kind of innovation stuff for big multinational corporates, and starting to see how the three threads of regeneration, spirituality and technology were starting to come together with this new way of being. Alongside which, through some of this journey, I started to hear about this prophecy. And so Virgilio, who runs Ecstatic Portugal, was sharing at this 5-day ecstatic event I went to that there is a prophecy in Portugal called the Fifth Kingdom, which has been around for it was first prophesied around 300 years ago and multiple times since, which talks of the day the child rules, prisoners are freed, and everything is shared. And what that is understood is that when that happens, is that a new empire will be born. However, it won't be a physical empire, but a spiritual one. And so originally, the Portuguese thought it was like this child king that was coming to them. And now what's understood is that the child rules is your essence. It's the inner child. It's you in all of your joy and your richness. Prisoners are freed is around meeting your shadows. It's about integrating them, realizing how your shadows are actually a tool for growth. It's about finding that in each other and seeing each other as that mirror. And then everything is shared as obviously as it is in the tin. So understanding this, and hearing about, the Kogis talk about 2026, like all these different lineages. It's like, however you want to look at it, the great turning, as it's also called, is approaching, and it's happening. 2026 is going to be the year that it all starts to happen. And so the prophecy originally talked about 2018 to 2025 is when it starts to open. And what you were seeing in Portugal is that all these people with this new mindset were starting to flood over there, along with the tech scene emerging, like land projects. And so I was kind of in this like epicenter of being like, there's so much creativity and new thoughts and people experimenting with all these different ways. I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. So all of this was kind of going great, and it's 18 months in for me being in Portugal. I've made some really great friends, and I'm like, I'm living my best life. This is great. But deep down, I was also like, I know that my job it's still not I'm not there. Like I've instinctively, since I was a child, was always like, I know I'm going to do something, and I've always been really entrepreneurial. And it's always felt like I'm in service of someone else's vision, but I was always like, but I don't know what my vision is yet. I don't know what the thing is. And, seeing something doesn't necessarily mean that you're meant to be the one to carry it either, or to birth it. And so I was kind of just waiting, and I was doing, these ideas. And anyway, it was the Lion's Mane portal. So this is 18 months ago now. So we're in 2024 in the summer. And so during this time, I've got really into like moon cycles and all the rest of it. So yeah, it's the Lion's Mane portal 2024, and I'm like, guides, I'm ready. Like I can feel it's close. I just need a sign. Like, what is the next thing? Like, what am I meant to do? And anyway, I blew out my candle, went back to sleep in my van, and the next day I get a call from my boss, and he's like, I'm really sorry, Sophia, but I've got to let you go. They'd lost one of their big clients, and I was freelance, and he was like, it's probably only going to be a few months, but we still want you, but I just can't afford to pay for you as a client. And I'm like, okay. I was like, thanks, universe. I hear you. Not the answer I wanted, but okay. So I was like, okay, shit, I've got to do this. So I guess this means that I'm trying to find the thing. And so the pieces that I had were a paradigm shift is happening that I feel like I want to be part of and help that happen. I believe that regeneration is the way forward, is this like as a philosophy of life and a way of being, and I love working with ideas. So I was like, okay, like let's see what I can work with. But I had no idea, like what am I going to offer? Like how would it be presented? Like none of it. And so I knew in that moment that I was like, this isn't going to be something that I fix mentally. Like this is, going on LinkedIn and Google searches, like isn't the way that I'm going to move through this. Like it has to be intuitively. And so I got into human design and really starting to understand that my sacral was my decision-making authority. I was really disciplining myself to only answer to that, even if it didn't really make sense. And so I kept just being like, yeah, okay, no, we're not doing this, and just following whatever came, to which in the end resulted in me getting this tattoo, my first tat, that says, this is surrender in Bengali. and it's to your truth and your intuition. So that was kind of like the philosophy that I was like, this is how I'm going to move through this. And what unfolded was, I suppose, me, like finding community, connecting to people, a lot of like very deep listening in tandem. I was going through relationship challenges and was just like, do you know what, I'm going to go on a celibacy journey because I recognize this connection between your sexual energy and your creative energy, and was just like, okay, like this is what I've got to do. I've got to listen, I've got to create, I've got to preserve my energy for myself and just like see what is unfolding. And so whilst this whole process is happening, I then also then go through this huge spiritual awakening, and I'm starting to see things and like empathically tune in and seeing like past memories, and I'm like, what the fuck is happening? Like everything was shifting so quickly, but at the same time nothing was happening. So my outer world, I was just like, I tried to get other jobs and it was just like, computer says no. Anything I tried to do, no. So I was like, okay, I guess I've just got to like sit this one out. And so now looking back on that, the last 18 months, it's been this kind of hibernation of my inner world, of just really like listening, attuning, like sensing the subtleties, like seeing like what's lighting me up, what wasn't. And I was trying to be really discerning. Like I started writing a research paper at the intersection of regeneration, spirituality and technology. And to begin with, I was like, oh my God, I've got to do another one of these calls. And I was like, wait, this is meant to be like the big, sexy, exciting career that I'm meant to be having that lights me up. If I'm feeling drained by this, I shouldn't be doing it. And so I was really trying to like check in and be like, okay, how do I change this so I am excited again? Or maybe I just chuck it out altogether. And so really starting to like listen to where joy was coming from and kind of following, you know, intuitively each step. And that's kind of how this, you know, got to where I am now, I guess, of this whole thing unfolding. And by the time it got to this summer, I started to recognize, as I was looking at business strategy frameworks, of how they would evolve, like what would the creation process look like, whether it's businesses or ideas, through a regenerative lens. And I started to kind of bring in this notion of working from essence and ecosystems and roles, and all of a sudden I realized the way I was experiencing the visioning and how I was reading people were actually kind of the same. So I was writing this incubation process while like trying to find the red thread between my like cosmic madness, and then was like, okay. And so I think like the journey is still unfolding. I feel like I'm coming into like the seeding, the spring process. And I'm now on a 5-month journey as well, because that essentially after 18 months of being in hibernation and listening, I was like, I need some new energy, I need to get out there. So I committed to doing a 5-month journey of synchronicity and just seeing where I went and who I would follow without enough money to get back almost, and just being like, okay, like the right jobs are going to come in, I'll meet the right people, and I just need to listen and follow the signs and see where I am. And it's taken me to Colombia in the Sierra Nevada, like working with the Ayahuascas and connecting with loads of different community projects and stuff, and still trying to see where it wants to unfold, but recognizing that kind of sensing essence and energy and how that can be alchemized into creation feels like the heart of the red thread, and how that then wants to be expressed, I guess, is still the next chapter. So the red thread is like that kind of narrative that goes through everything that you're doing. So even if things might feel like they're completely disconnected, it's really starting to recognize like what is that patterning or the thing that's kind of pulling you in at each of those moments. And that could be through relationships, through, you know, who are the people that you're really connected to, what are you drawn to. If you look at previous like work paths, it's like what is the thing that is lighting you up at each of those stages, and seeing the consistent thing that keeps drawing you in. And I remember a long time ago, a recruiter once said to me, in life you should write a list where you've got 5 things professionally, 5 things personally, try and make them like one word, really succinct about, you know, what's going to light you up, what's going to make you feel fulfilled. And if you're not doing at least 3 things across either side of that list in total, why are you doing it? And I recognized at the beginning of my career that half the time I wasn't doing any of the things. I was just like, oh, this is going to look really good on my CV, because someone had told me that that's what the path was meant to be. But it's like, whose CV are you creating it for? Like yourself, or, you know, or another organization? I think the reason why most people struggle to find their purpose is because as a society, we've prohibited our sense of individual sovereignty. And so we've really started to, you know, in our schooling systems, in the way that we believe of what success is. You know, like you go to school, you go to university, you have a family, like there is a set path that is kind of laid out of what is considered to be a successful way of life. And so in tandem with that, it's like we've forgotten to listen to, like, to understand like how to listen to our bodies. We're not being encouraged to challenge and say like, well, what do I actually think about that? Is that something I want to do? And so in doing so, it's like, you know, it's a lot easier for us just to fall in line and follow than it is to really start to sense like, okay, what is my intuition telling me here? And being empowered by the system to actually then follow that. And so I think a lot of the time it's a lot easier, or we get entrapped into these situations of what we think is good, rather than actually taking the time to listen and to explore. And I also think in conjunction with living in a society that establishes money as our primary success factor, also shifts that, because, you know, our relationship of like, well, I need all these things, so I need to earn a certain amount, and therefore, you know, what's going to be a good job to get me a certain amount of livelihood, rather than really kind of tuning in and being like, okay, well, where do I want to be lit up? What can I do? And so the more space, I think, earlier on in when we're raising children and teenagers is like encouraging them to have that freedom to start listening and following like what's exciting, and to have space to experiment, like to get things wrong and to try it out. Like, I think that enables you to start finding your own path and having the courage to realize that it's okay to take risks. It's okay to do something that everyone else isn't, even if it seems scary at times. So I think the biggest struggle that I've had in living my purpose has been those moments when you still feel completely lost in it, and when it's still unfolding, and you know, you don't have the clear line of like, well, this is what I'm doing and this is what I'm about, and you're just kind of watching everything unfold, and it gets to a point where you're kind of just like, how much longer can I do this? Like, how much longer can I sit in this discomfort or not knowing? And I think for me, like, the spiritual path, like, really helped me in that. Like, and it was a long journey, which I think I'm still on, of like trying to trust in the universe and trying to trust that things were happening for me and that it was going to be okay as long as I kept listening. But, you know, in doing so, you really have to, I think in listening and creating that space, it also meant letting go of a lot of things, which was also really uncomfortable and painful. So I think it's when you're in the middle of that transition where it's like things are falling away, but nothing's coming in yet. And not only do I not know what it is or what I'm asking to be called in, and I can't see it, but you're just in this kind of vast space of not knowing, of the unknown. And like, that's a really scary place to be, when you don't know when the safety net or that comfort's coming back to catch you. But there's a quote that I read a really long time ago that says, like, when everything is unknown, everything is possible. And so I think there is that sense of, you know, sometimes you need to clear the garden in order for the, you know, new crop to kind of grow, and just like trusting in the process. And I think for me, this recent event is probably the third time that I've gone through that collapse. And even though I know it was like, I know I'm about to climb a mountain and it's going to be like some tears and it's going to be hard. And, at the end of it, I'm not going to be the same person. And I will have reached a new point of meaning in my life where there's so much richness. And so that's the thing, that in those moments at night when you're like, oh my God, just someone help me, it keeps you moving forward. When I used to think about being back in London, when all I wanted was like, I just want to be in nature and with community and music, and then flash forward 3 years and I'm having that same kind of moment of like, what am I doing? But I'm sat in this pine forest, like, looking out at my van and watching the sunset with an ocean view and the birds calling around me and a fire being lit and friends are due to arrive shortly. And it's like, this was what I wished for. And like, all of that change and shift over the last 3 years, it's got me here. And like, now I have a life that's beautiful, and that can't be taken away, because it's like I went through that journey and untreaded and regrew and all the rest of it to get here. And it's like, and that's what I'm about to start again. And so I think it's just trusting in that kind of evolution process, that at the end of it there will be more meaning and joy. My advice for people that haven't found their purpose yet is to find space to listen and to experiment. I think really starting to understand and develop tools for listening beyond listening that we understand, but like listening to your body, like understanding, okay, how do I react to things? When am I retracting? When am I in expansion? When am I choosing something because of fear? When am I choosing something because of joy? When am I saying shoulds? Like listening to all of those little cues and starting to become more attuned to when you're being programmed and when you're approaching something from truth, I think starts to then reveal patterning and show what you're actually naturally being pulled towards. And also recognizing when there's really big blocks equally, where it's like, why, this just feels like I'm pushing water up a hill, like why is this so hard, is like, okay, maybe it's hard because it's not in flow, and actually just be okay with letting that go. Like, let go of control and try and surrender into it, as hard as it can be. But it's like, the more we can start to be like, oh, there's something, it's like the more you then start to get on that path where it becomes more natural and more easeful and things start to come in. But I think it's a tuning. So the effect that I believe I've been able to have so far in me living my purpose is ironically helping other people find their purpose. I think the fact that the work that I'm doing is all around, and it's around essence and energy and understanding like what is your unique purpose and role and what you want to create. And so whether that's at an individual layer of helping articulate and like helping at an individual level maybe articulate something that feels quite scattered, like, I'm doing this thing here and I'm doing this, and what is, I don't understand which direction I'm being pulled in because it's all over the place, is really helping people to kind of like collapse that into something more single-minded, that's like, okay, what is at the core of all of this? Like, what is the thing that's really driving you, and coming back to that essence, as I spoke of earlier, and that energy, and helping them be able to see that in themselves, and just giving words to something that they already know. And likewise at an organizational level is really helping businesses. I think it's like, it's finding a way that really not only differentiates them, but as founders, like they get really excited about like all of a sudden there's this new layer of richness and depth and creativity that it's like, oh wow, yeah, like this is what we're about. We want to do this thing even richer and deeper and more expansively and bigger. And that's really exciting. So I think it's like, it's helping make sense of what can feel like kind of quite chaotic ideas, and just kind of bringing it back into that kind of grounding. I think the world would be a much more joyful place if we were all living our purpose. I think, we would be able to spend time really nurturing things that excite us, that light us up. We would naturally I think, be able to find more ways to collaborate with each other. You know, you spend so much time of your time working, and the amount that people feel drained from that because it's about surviving. And actually, when we move from surviving and into creation, you know, you feel fulfilled. You feel like you want to be giving something back. You want to share something with the world. And that's like a really beautiful, exciting place to be, that you get to like experience the depth of someone and the way that they're seeing the world. A little while ago, someone was telling me about how we've misappropriated the word weird, and we've come to find it to mean something strange or obscure, but it actually used to be around uniqueness and the individuality that somebody holds, the kind of this magic kind of mystical sense. So I think we should all get a bit more weird and enjoy that, like enjoy our diversity, to experiment in how we express ourselves, to find out, you know, who you really are and who you want to be, and be able to celebrate that in each other.